The dust kicked up by Samuel Morrison's horse settled slowly in the still afternoon air as he pulled his mount to a halt. Something was wrong ahead, on the narrow trail that wound through the rocky canyon. Through the heat shimmer, he could make out a figure crouched beside what looked like a broken wagon wheel. Samuel had been riding hard for 3 hours, eager to reach the trading post in Canyon Creek before sunset. His saddlebags were heavy with silver coins from selling cattle in Tucson, and he wanted to purchase supplies before heading back to his small ranch. But something about the scene ahead made him slow his approach. As he drew closer, Samuel could see it was a woman kneeling beside an old wooden wagon. Her long black hair hung loose around her shoulders, and she wore a simple brown dress that had seen better days. The wagon's left wheel had come completely off, leaving the vehicle tilted at an awkward angle. Scattered around the ground were various belongings that had spilled from the wagon bed. The woman looked up as Samuel approached, and he was struck by her dark, intelligent eyes. There was no fear in her gaze, only a quiet dignity that seemed unusual for someone stranded alone in this remote country. She appeared to be in her 20s, with high cheekbones and bronze skin that spoke of Apache heritage. Samuel had lived in Arizona Territory for 5 years now, long enough to know that relations between settlers and the Apache were complicated and often dangerous. Most ranchers in the area kept their distance from any Apache they encountered, preferring to avoid trouble. But something about this woman's situation stirred his conscience. He dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible and speaking in a calm voice. "Ma'am, looks like you're having some trouble with your wagon." The woman studied him for a moment before responding. "The wheel came loose about an hour ago," she said in clear English with only the slightest accent. "I've been trying to fix it, but the axle is bent too." Samuel could see she was right. The wooden axle had cracked when the wheel came off, probably from hitting one of the large rocks that dotted the trail. It wasn't something that could be easily repaired without proper tools and materials. "Where were you headed?" Samuel asked, crouching down to examine the damage more closely. "To the settlement at Pine Ridge," she replied. "My grandmother is very sick, and I have medicine for her." Samuel knew Pine Ridge. It was a small Apache settlement about 15 miles north of here, nestled in a valley between two mesas. It would take at least 6 hours to walk there, and the sun was already beginning its descent toward the western horizon. "That's a long walk, especially carrying supplies," Samuel said, gesturing toward the various bundles and containers scattered around the wagon. "And it's not safe to be out here alone after dark." The woman's jaw tightened slightly. "I have no choice. My grandmother needs this medicine." Samuel looked around at the desolate landscape. The nearest town was Canyon Creek, which was in the opposite direction from Pine Ridge. There was no guarantee anyone else would come along this remote trail, especially before nightfall. The thought of leaving this woman stranded here didn't sit right with him. "Look," he said after a moment of consideration, "I've got some rope and tools back at my cabin. It's only about 3 miles from here. I could probably rig up something to get your wagon moving again, at least well enough to reach Pine Ridge." The woman looked surprised by his offer. "Why would you help me?" she asked directly. It was a fair question. Samuel had heard plenty of stories about Apache raids and attacks on isolated ranches. Most of his neighbors would think he was crazy for even stopping to talk to her. But looking at this woman, seeing the worry in her eyes about her sick grandmother, he couldn't bring himself to just ride away. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "My name's Samuel Morrison. I have a small ranch about 3 miles back that way." He pointed toward a gap in the canyon walls to the southeast. "I am Maria Delgado," she said after a pause, "and I appreciate your kindness, but I cannot ask you to go out of your way for a stranger." "You're not asking," Samuel replied with a slight smile. "I'm offering. Besides, I can't in good conscience leave you stranded out here. There are mountain lions in these canyons, not to mention other dangers after dark." Maria seemed to consider this for a long moment. Samuel could see her weighing her options, probably wondering if she could trust this strange white rancher who had stopped to help her. "Very well," she said finally, "but I insist on paying you for your trouble." Samuel waved off her offer. "No payment necessary. Just help me load what we can carry onto my horse, and we'll come back for the rest once we get your wagon fixed." Working together, they gathered Maria's most essential belongings. Samuel was impressed by how efficiently she organized everything, quickly separating the medicines and food items that she would need immediately from the less critical supplies that could wait. Among her belongings, Samuel noticed several beautifully woven baskets and what appeared to be traditional Apache pottery. There were also bundles of dried herbs and roots that he assumed were part of the medicine she was taking to her grandmother. "You know a lot about healing?" Samuel asked as they secured the bundles to his saddle. "My grandmother taught me," Maria replied. "She knows the old ways, the plants that can cure sickness and ease pain, but she is very old now, and her own medicine cannot help her anymore." As they worked, Samuel found himself curious about Maria's story. It was unusual to encounter an Apache woman traveling alone with such valuable items. Most Apache he had encountered lived in larger family groups and rarely traveled the main trails used by settlers. "Do you live at Pine Ridge?" he asked. "Sometimes," Maria said carefully. "I move around quite a bit, trading medicines and crafts in different settlements." Samuel sensed there was more to her story than she was sharing, but he didn't press for details. Everyone in this territory had reasons for keeping some things private. With the essential items secured, Samuel helped Maria climb up behind him on his horse. She hesitated for a moment before accepting his assistance, clearly uncomfortable with the arrangement but recognizing the practicality of it. As they rode toward his cabin, Samuel found himself acutely aware of Maria's presence behind him. She sat straight and alert, occasionally pointing out landmarks or commenting on the terrain. Despite the circumstances, she seemed completely at ease in this wild country. "You've lived here long?" she asked as they navigated around a cluster of large boulders. "About 5 years now," Samuel replied. "Came out from Missouri after the war ended. Wanted to start fresh somewhere new." "And you chose this place?" There was a hint of amusement in her voice. Samuel chuckled. "I know it doesn't look like much, but there's good grazing land in the valleys and fresh water from the mountain streams. It's honest work, and I can make a decent living with cattle." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, with only the sound of hoofbeats and the occasional call of a hawk circling overhead. Samuel found himself wondering what his neighbors would think if they could see him now, riding through Apache country with a strange woman behind him on his horse. As they approached his cabin, Samuel felt a mix of pride and embarrassment about his humble homestead. The small log cabin he had built himself wasn't much to look at, but it was solid and well-maintained. A small corral held 3 horses, and a vegetable garden showed signs of careful tending. "You built all this yourself?" Maria asked as they approached. "Most of it," Samuel replied. "Had some help with the barn raising, but the cabin and corral are my own work." Maria seemed impressed by the neat, orderly appearance of the small ranch. Everything had its place, from the tools hanging in the barn to the wood pile stacked against the cabin wall. After helping Maria down from the horse, Samuel gathered his tools and some heavy rope from the barn. He also filled a water skin and grabbed some dried meat from his supplies, knowing the repair work might take several hours. "We should be able to get back to your wagon before dark," he said as they prepared to leave. "With any luck, I can get you back on the trail to Pine Ridge by tomorrow morning." As they rode back toward the broken wagon, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was going to change his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. There was something about Maria that intrigued him beyond her immediate predicament. She carried herself with a quiet confidence that spoke of hidden depths and untold stories. The sun was beginning to cast longer shadows across the canyon floor when they reached the abandoned wagon. Samuel immediately set to work examining the damaged axle, while Maria organized her scattered belongings. "The crack isn't as bad as I first thought," Samuel said after a thorough inspection. "I can reinforce it with some splints and rope. It won't be pretty, but it should hold long enough to get you where you're going." As he worked, Maria watched his skilled hands shape and position the wooden splints. She had clearly underestimated this quiet rancher who had stopped to help a stranger. There was something about his calm competence and genuine concern that set him apart from most of the white settlers she had encountered. The repair work took longer than Samuel had hoped. By the time he had the wheel back on and the axle properly reinforced, the sun was setting behind the canyon walls. In the gathering darkness, the isolated location felt more remote and potentially dangerous. "It's too late to start for Pine Ridge now," Samuel said, wiping his hands on a cloth. "These trails aren't safe to travel in the dark, especially with a makeshift repair like this." Maria looked toward the north, clearly torn between her desire to reach her grandmother quickly and the practical reality of their situation. "You could come back to my cabin for the night," Samuel offered carefully. "I have a spare room, and you'd be safe there. We could start fresh in the morning." It was a bold suggestion, and Samuel knew it. Offering shelter to an Apache woman was something that would be viewed with suspicion and possibly hostility by his neighbors. But leaving her alone out here overnight wasn't an option he could live with. Maria studied his face in the fading light, searching for any sign of ulterior motives. What she saw was genuine concern and an honest desire to help. After a moment, she nodded. "Thank you," she said simply. "I accept your offer." As they made their way back to Samuel's cabin in the gathering darkness, neither of them could know that this simple act of kindness was about to set in motion events that would test both of their courage and change the course of their lives forever. Samuel's cabin felt different with Maria's presence inside. The small main room, which had always seemed adequately sized for one person, now felt intimate and charged with an energy he hadn't experienced since leaving Missouri. He busied himself lighting the oil lamps and stoking the fire in the stone hearth, while Maria examined her surroundings with the careful attention of someone accustomed to assessing new environments quickly. "Please make yourself comfortable," Samuel said, gesturing toward the simple wooden chairs he had crafted himself. "I'll prepare some food. You must be hungry after such a long day." Maria settled into one of the chairs, her posture remaining alert despite Samuel's obvious attempts to put her at ease. She watched as he moved efficiently around the small kitchen area, retrieving supplies from wooden barrels and hanging bundles of preserved meat. "You live here alone?" she asked, her eyes taking in the neat, orderly cabin that showed clear signs of a solitary occupant. "Yes, for the past 3 years," Samuel replied as he sliced salt pork into a heavy iron skillet. "I had a partner when I first came out here, but he decided ranch life wasn't for him. Went back to Kansas last spring." The smell of cooking meat soon filled the cabin, mixing with the pine scent from the burning logs. Samuel prepared a simple meal of fried pork, cornbread, and coffee, apologizing for the plain fare. "It's better than what I expected to eat tonight," Maria said, accepting the plate he offered her. "I thought I would be sleeping on the ground beside a broken wagon." As they ate, Samuel found himself studying Maria's face in the flickering lamplight. There was something about her that didn't quite fit the image he had formed of Apache women from the few encounters he'd had with tribal members. Her English was too polished, her mannerisms too refined. She handled the metal fork and knife with the ease of someone familiar with white customs. "You learned English from your grandmother?" he asked carefully. Maria paused in her eating, considering how much to reveal. "Among other things," she said finally, "my grandmother had many teachers throughout her life." The vague answer only increased Samuel's curiosity, but he sensed she wasn't ready to share more personal details. Instead, He steered the conversation toward safer topics like the weather and local trail conditions. As the evening progressed, Samuel noticed Maria gradually relaxing. The rigid alertness in her posture softened, and she began to volunteer small details about her journey and the country they were traveling through. She spoke knowledgeably about the various plants and animals of the region, pointing out through the cabin window where certain medicinal herbs could be found. "Your grandmother taught you well," Samuel observed as Maria described the healing properties of sage and prickly pear cactus. "She taught me many things," Maria replied, a note of sadness entering her voice. "That's why I must reach her soon. She is the last one who remembers the old ways, and when she dies, much knowledge will die with her." Samuel heard something in her tone that suggested there was more urgency to her journey than just delivering medicine. But before he could ask more questions, Maria suddenly stood and moved to the window, her body tensing. "What is it?" Samuel asked, instantly alert. "I heard something," Maria whispered, pressing herself against the wall beside the window. "Horses moving quietly." Samuel quickly extinguished the nearest oil lamp and moved to join her at the window. In the moonlight, he could see several shadowy figures on horseback, positioned around his property. They had approached so silently that his own horses in the corral hadn't even whinnied a warning. "Apache," he whispered. Maria nodded grimly. "My brother and his men. They've been tracking me." The revelation hit Samuel like a physical blow. "Your brother?" "His name is Joaquin," Maria said quietly, her eyes never leaving the window. "He leads a small band of warriors who refuse to accept the reservation treaties. He believes I've been compromised by too much contact with white settlers." Samuel felt his heart racing as the implications became clear. "He's here for you." "Yes, and he probably thinks you've taken me captive or worse." Maria turned to face him, her expression grave. "You need to understand, Samuel. My brother doesn't make distinctions between good and bad white men. To him, you're all the same." Through the window, Samuel could now make out at least 6 mounted figures surrounding his cabin. They moved with the practiced silence of experienced warriors, positioning themselves to cut off any possible escape routes. The moonlight glinted occasionally off rifle barrels and steel blades. "What does he want?" Samuel asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "To take me back to the band, and to punish anyone he thinks has dishonored me or our family." Maria's voice was steady, but Samuel could see the fear in her eyes. "He's very protective and very dangerous when he's angry." Samuel moved away from the window and began checking his weapons. He had a Winchester rifle and 2 revolvers, but against 6 Apache warriors in the dark, his chances wouldn't be good. More importantly, he realized that any show of force would likely seal both their fates. "Can you talk to him?" he asked. "Explain that I was just helping you?" Maria shook her head. "Joaquin doesn't listen to explanations. He sees what he sees and acts accordingly. Right now, he sees his sister spending the night in a white man's cabin." A chill ran down Samuel's spine as he grasped the full danger of the situation. His simple act of kindness had put both of them in mortal peril. "Is there anything I can say to him? Any way to show respect for Apache customs?" Maria considered this for a moment. "You could offer to make restitution for the perceived offense, but Joaquin would probably see that as an admission of guilt." Samuel ran his hand through his hair, trying to think clearly despite the fear that was beginning to cloud his judgment. "What would happen if I just step outside and try to talk to him man to man?" "He would probably kill you on the spot," Maria said bluntly, "and then take me back to face punishment for bringing shame on our family." The reality of their trapped situation settled over Samuel like a heavy weight. He had acted out of simple human decency, but cultural misunderstandings and suspicions had transformed his good deed into a potential death sentence for both of them. A sound from outside made them both freeze. Someone was moving around the cabin, testing the doors and windows. Samuel could hear soft footsteps circling the building, and occasionally the creak of wooden shutters being examined. "They're looking for the best way in," Maria whispered. "They won't wait much longer." Samuel's mind raced through their limited options. The cabin was solidly built, but it wasn't designed to withstand a determined assault. The windows could be broken, the door forced. And even if he could hold them off for a while, what then? He had enough food and water for perhaps a week, but no way to get word to anyone who might help. "Maria," he said quietly, "I need you to tell me the truth about something. Is there any chance your brother might listen to reason if he understood what really happened?" Maria was quiet for a long moment, staring out into the darkness where her brother waited. "There might be one way," she said finally, "but it would require you to trust me completely, and it would put you at great risk." "I'm already at great risk," Samuel pointed out. "What do you have in mind?" "In Apache culture, there are certain formalities that can transform a potentially shameful situation into an honorable one, but they require the participation of both parties." Samuel waited for her to continue, sensing that she was struggling with how much to reveal. "If Joaquin believed that your intentions toward me were honorable and permanent, he might accept the situation. Apache law recognizes certain forms of commitment between a man and woman, even from different tribes." The meaning behind her carefully chosen words slowly dawned on Samuel. "You're talking about marriage." Maria nodded. "Not a legal marriage by white standards, but a commitment ceremony that Joaquin would have to respect according to our traditions. It would mean that instead of dishonoring me, you had actually honored me with a proposal of marriage." Samuel felt the ground shifting beneath him metaphorically. He had known this woman for less than 24 hours, yet she was suggesting they enter into some form of marriage ceremony to save both their lives. "Would such a commitment be binding?" he asked carefully. "Under Apache law, yes. But we could arrange for it to be dissolved later if you wished, once the immediate danger passed." Samuel looked around his small cabin, at the simple life he had built for himself in this remote corner of Arizona territory. Everything had changed so quickly that he could barely process what was happening. Yet he found himself drawn to this remarkable woman who faced danger with such calm courage. "If we did this," he said slowly, "what exactly would it involve?" Maria explained the basic elements of an Apache commitment ceremony, emphasizing that it required both parties to speak certain words and exchange symbolic gifts in front of witnesses. Joaquin and his warriors would serve as the witnesses, and their presence would make the ceremony officially valid. "But Samuel," Maria added seriously, "you need to understand that once we do this, Joaquin will consider you part of our family. That means you'll be expected to follow certain codes of honor and behavior. It's not something to enter into lightly." Outside, the sounds of movement were getting closer to the cabin door. Samuel could hear low voices speaking in what he assumed was Apache, probably planning their next move. "How long do I have to decide?" he asked. "Not long. They'll make their move soon, probably before dawn." Samuel found himself thinking about the emptiness of his solitary life, the long evenings with only his own thoughts for company, the lack of any real purpose beyond mere survival. Looking at Maria, seeing her strength and intelligence even in this desperate situation, he realized that perhaps fate had brought her into his life for reasons beyond mere chance. "If I agreed to this," he said, "what happens afterward?" "Where would we go?" "That would depend on many things," Maria replied. "But first, we have to survive the night." A loud thump against the cabin door made them both jump. Joaquin was apparently growing tired of waiting and was ready to take direct action. "Maria!" A deep voice called from outside in heavily accented English. "Come out now. We know you're in there with the white man." Maria moved closer to the door but didn't open it. "Joaquin," she called back, "I am safe. This man helped me when my wagon broke. He has shown me only kindness and respect." "White men do not help Apache women without wanting something in return," Joaquin replied coldly. "Come out now, and we will deal with this matter quickly." Samuel could hear the implied threat in the warrior's voice. He looked at Maria, seeing the fear she was trying so hard to hide. "Maria," he said quietly, "if we're going to do this, it has to be now." She nodded, understanding that they had run out of time for careful deliberation. "Are you certain? Once we begin the ceremony, there will be no turning back." Samuel thought about the alternative. A brief, violent confrontation that would likely end with both of them dead. Then he thought about the possibility of a different kind of life, one shared with this remarkable woman who had somehow found her way to his remote cabin. "I'm certain," he said, surprising himself with the steadiness of his own voice. Maria took a deep breath and called out to her brother again. "Joaquin, I ask you to honor our traditions and witness a commitment ceremony between myself and Samuel Morrison. He wishes to speak the binding words and make this a matter of honor rather than shame." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Samuel could almost feel Joaquin considering this unexpected development, weighing the implications according to Apache customs and his own sense of family honor. Finally, the voice came again, harder and more suspicious than before. "If this is true, then let him come out and speak these words in front of men, not hiding like a coward in his wooden lodge." Samuel checked his weapons one more time, then moved toward the door. Maria caught his arm. "Remember," she said softly, "once you step outside, you're under the protection of Apache tradition. But you must show respect and follow my lead exactly." Samuel nodded, placed his hand on the door latch, and prepared to step out into a night that would change the course of his life forever. Samuel opened the cabin door slowly, his hands visible and empty of weapons. The cool night air hit his face as he stepped into the moonlit yard, immediately aware of the dark figures positioned around his property. 6 Apache warriors sat motionless on their horses, rifles resting across their laps, their faces painted for war. In the center of the group, a man who could only be Joaquin watched Samuel's emergence with eyes that seemed to burn with controlled fury. Maria followed Samuel outside, moving with deliberate grace to position herself slightly behind him and to his right, in what Samuel instinctively understood was the proper position according to Apache custom. Her presence at his side was both comforting and terrifying, knowing that their lives now depended on the next few minutes. Joaquin dismounted from his horse, a magnificent paint stallion that snorted and stamped nervously in the tense atmosphere. He was younger than Samuel had expected, perhaps 25 years old, but his bearing spoke of a man who had seen considerable warfare. Scars marked his arms and chest, and his black hair was adorned with eagle feathers that caught the moonlight. Despite his youth, the other warriors clearly deferred to his authority. "So," Joaquin said in careful English, his voice carrying across the small yard, "the white rancher wishes to claim my sister as his woman." Samuel felt Maria's subtle touch on his back, a reminder to follow her lead and show proper respect. He had never been in a situation remotely like this, but he understood that every word and gesture would be scrutinized for signs of dishonor or deception. "I wish to honor your sister with the commitment of marriage," Samuel said clearly, trying to keep his voice steady despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm him. "She came to me in need of help, and I have seen her courage, wisdom, and kindness. I ask your permission to speak the binding words according to your traditions." Joaquin studied Samuel for a long moment. his dark eyes searching for any hint of falsehood or disrespect. The other warriors remained mounted but alert, their weapons ready to respond instantly to their leader's commands. "My sister has been away from our people too long," Joaquin said finally. "She has forgotten that Apache women do not belong with white men. This talk of marriage is just words to avoid the consequences of dishonor." Maria stepped forward slightly, her voice carrying a note of authority that surprised Samuel. "Brother, you know that I have always chosen my own path. This man showed kindness to a stranger and asked for nothing in return. Is that not the behavior of a man worthy of respect?" "Words," Joaquin spat. "White men speak many words, but their hearts are false. They take what they want and give nothing back." Samuel sensed that this was a crucial moment. Joaquin's anger ran deeper than just concern for his sister's honor. It stemmed from years of broken treaties, stolen land, and countless betrayals by white settlers and soldiers. To him, Samuel represented everything wrong with the white invasion of Apache territory. "You have every right to distrust my people," Samuel said carefully. "I know that many whites have brought nothing but pain and loss to the Apache, but I ask you to judge me by my own actions, not by the crimes of others." One of the mounted warriors spoke rapidly in Apache to Joaquin, his tone urgent and hostile. Samuel caught the word "kill" spoken in English, and his blood ran cold. Maria responded in the same language, her voice firm and commanding. The exchange continued for several minutes, with Joaquin listening intently to both speakers. Finally, Joaquin raised his hand for silence. "My cousin believes we should finish this matter quickly and be done with it," he said to Samuel. "He thinks your words are just a trick to stay alive until help arrives." "I understand his suspicion," Samuel replied. "But I give you my word that I have sent for no help and expect none. This is between us, and I'm prepared to accept the judgment of Apache tradition." Maria spoke again in Apache, this time addressing all the warriors present. Samuel could tell from her tone and gestures that she was making some kind of formal statement or appeal. When she finished, several of the men looked thoughtful, though their weapons remained ready. "My sister reminds us of the old laws," Joaquin said slowly. "Laws that say a man may prove his worth through actions, not just words. She proposes a test." Samuel felt his heart racing faster. "What kind of test?" "You say you wish to honor my sister with marriage. In the old days, a warrior who wanted to marry a woman from our tribe had to prove he could provide for her and protect her. He had to demonstrate skills and courage worthy of an Apache woman." Samuel glanced at Maria, trying to read her expression in the moonlight. She gave him the slightest nod of encouragement. "What would I need to do?" Samuel asked. Joaquin walked closer, stopping just a few feet away from Samuel. This close, Samuel could see the intelligence behind the warrior's fierce expression, and he realized that Joaquin was not just a simple raider, but a thoughtful leader trying to navigate an impossible situation. "There is an outlaw camp in the mountains about 10 miles north of here," Joaquin said. 6 white men who steal cattle and horses from both Apache and white ranchers. They killed 2 of our people last month and escaped into the rocks where we could not follow with horses." Samuel began to understand where this was leading. "You want me to deal with them?" "I want you to prove that you can protect what belongs to you," Joaquin corrected. "These outlaws have been raiding your neighbors' ranches too. They will come for your cattle eventually. A man who cannot defend his property cannot defend a wife." The challenge was clearly dangerous, but Samuel recognized it as an opportunity to prove his worth according to Apache standards. It also revealed something about Joaquin's character. He was offering Samuel a chance to demonstrate courage, rather than simply killing him outright. "If I succeed in dealing with these outlaws," Samuel said, "you'll accept the marriage ceremony? If you succeed and survive, we will consider that the spirits have spoken in your favor," Joaquin replied. "But you will not go alone. 2 of my warriors will accompany you." both to witness your actions and to ensure you do not simply ride away." Samuel looked around at the mounted warriors, wondering which two would be chosen for this potentially suicidal mission. The outlaw camp Joaquin described sounded like a formidable challenge even for experienced fighters. "I accept your terms," Samuel said after a moment's consideration. "When do we leave?" "At dawn," Joaquin replied. "We will make camp here tonight and watch both you and my sister to ensure there are no tricks or attempts to escape." As if this was a signal, the warriors began dismounting and preparing to establish a camp in Samuel's yard. They moved efficiently and quietly, clearly accustomed to making temporary camps in hostile territory. Samuel watched in fascination as they hobbled their horses and began gathering materials for small, smokeless fires. Maria touched Samuel's arm gently. "We should prepare supplies for the journey," she said quietly, "and I need to explain some things about Apache warfare that might help you survive." Back inside the cabin, with Joaquin's permission, Maria and Samuel gathered weapons, ammunition, food, and water for the coming expedition. Samuel cleaned his rifle carefully, while Maria prepared travel rations and filled water skins. "These outlaws Joaquin mentioned," Samuel said as they worked. "Do you know anything about them?" "They're dangerous men," Maria replied. "They've been using an old mine shaft in the mountains as their base. The area is full of caves and narrow passages that make it nearly impossible to approach without being seen." Samuel felt a chill of apprehension. "Sounds like a perfect place for an ambush. That's why most people avoid them," Maria said. "But Joaquin is right about one thing. They will eventually target your ranch if they haven't already. They've been getting bolder lately." As they prepared for what might be Samuel's last night alive, Maria shared what she knew about Apache fighting techniques and the specific warriors who would accompany him. She also revealed more about her own background, explaining that her father had been a respected war chief who had insisted she learn both Apache traditions and white customs. "That's why your English is so good," Samuel observed. "My father believed that understanding both worlds would help our people survive the changes coming to this land," Maria explained. "He sent me to live with a missionary family for 2 years when I was younger, to learn white ways." This revelation helped explain the contradictions Samuel had noticed in Maria's behavior and knowledge. She was truly a woman caught between two cultures, trying to navigate the dangerous waters of a territory where Apache and white interests were constantly in conflict. As the night wore on, Samuel found himself studying Maria's face in the lamplight, memorizing her features in case he didn't survive the coming day. There was something surreal about preparing for a potentially fatal mission just hours after meeting this remarkable woman. "Maria," he said quietly, "if something happens to me tomorrow, what will you do?" "I'll complete my journey to Pine Ridge," she replied without hesitation. "My grandmother still needs the medicine I'm carrying." Samuel admired her practical acceptance of the situation. Despite the danger he was facing on her behalf, she remained focused on her original mission. "And if I do survive this test?" he asked. Maria was quiet for a moment, considering her answer carefully. "Then we'll be bound together according to Apache law, and we'll have to figure out what that means for both of our lives." The uncertainty in her voice reminded Samuel that this arrangement was as strange and challenging for her as it was for him. They were both taking enormous risks based on a single day of acquaintance and the desperate circumstances that had brought them together. Outside, Samuel could hear the quiet voices of the Apache warriors maintaining their watch. Occasionally, one of them would move around the cabin, checking the doors and windows. It was clear that escape was not an option, even if Samuel had wanted to abandon Maria to save his own life. As dawn approached, Samuel tried to get some sleep on his simple wooden bed while Maria rested in the spare room he had offered her. But sleep proved elusive, as his mind raced through the challenges awaiting him in just a few hours. When the eastern sky began to lighten, Samuel rose and prepared for what might be his final morning. He checked his weapons one last time, filled his pockets with extra ammunition, and tried to eat some breakfast despite his churning stomach. Joaquin appeared at the cabin door just as the sun cleared the horizon. "It is time," he announced simply. Samuel stepped outside to find two warriors already mounted and waiting. One was the cousin who had spoken angrily the night before, a man of perhaps 30 with a permanent scowl and suspicious eyes. The other was younger, maybe 20, with alert features and an expression that seemed more curious than hostile. "These are Diego and Carlos," Joaquin said, indicating the older and younger warriors respectively. "They will ride with you and report back on your actions." Samuel mounted his own horse, acutely aware that he was about to ride into extreme danger with two men who might be just as likely to kill him as help him. The irony wasn't lost on him that his simple act of helping a stranded woman had led to this moment. As they prepared to ride out, Maria appeared in the cabin doorway. Her eyes met Samuel's across the yard, and he saw in them a mixture of worry, hope, and something else he couldn't quite identify. "Be careful," she called to him. "Remember what I told you about Apache fighting tactics?" Samuel nodded, touched by her concern. "Take care of yourself, Maria. I'll be back." "See that you are," Joaquin said grimly. "My sister's honor depends on it." As Samuel rode out of his yard, flanked by two Apache warriors, he looked back once to see Maria standing in his doorway, watching them disappear into the morning landscape. He wondered if he would ever see her again, or if this dangerous gamble would end with his death in some remote mountain canyon. The sun climbed higher as they rode north toward the outlaw camp, and Samuel tried to focus on the challenges ahead rather than dwelling on all the ways this mission could go wrong. He was committed now, bound by his word and Apache tradition to see this through to whatever end awaited him. Behind him, his cabin grew smaller in the distance, but the image of Maria standing in his doorway remained vivid in his mind. Whatever happened in the hours ahead, he knew that his life had been irrevocably changed by one simple decision to help a stranger on a remote trail. The adventure that had begun with a broken wagon wheel was about to reach its climax in the dangerous mountains ahead, where Samuel would either prove himself worthy of Apache respect or die in the attempt.